The crystalline spires of Nova Lumina caught the light of 3 setting suns, sending rainbow fragments dancing across the capital city of the Silveri Concordat. In the astronomical observatory, Chief Astronomer Lyra Telvarian's hands trembled as she reviewed the data for the 4th time. The holographic display couldn't be clearer. A massive fleet of Krex warships had entered the outer reaches of their system. The Silveri were known throughout the galaxy for their mastery of bioengineering and their living architecture, cities grown from crystalline organisms that responded to thought and emotion. They had evolved beyond the need for conventional weapons centuries ago, focusing instead on advancing their understanding of life itself. Their defensive capabilities consisted mainly of shields designed to protect against solar radiation and space debris. Against the Krex Empire's plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes, they might as well have been tissue paper. Lyra rushed through the luminescent corridors of the Grand Council chamber, her silver robes flowing behind her. The council members, already assembled due to her urgent summons, fell silent as she entered. High Chancellor Vexmeron, his bioluminescent markings pulsing with concern, gestured for her to speak. The rumors were true, Lyra announced, her voice steady despite her fear. The Krex fleet will reach our outer colonies within 15 standard days. Their numbers. She paused, swallowing hard. We've counted over 300 capital ships. The chamber erupted in murmurs of dismay. The Krex Empire's reputation preceded them. A species that had evolved in the harsh environment of a dying star system, they had become conquest-driven survivors who saw the galaxy's resources as theirs to claim. Their biology allowed them to survive in environments that would kill most species, and their technology was built for one purpose: subjugation. We must evacuate, one council member suggested, his markings flickering in panic. To where? Another countered. The Krex won't stop until they've stripped our worlds bare. They'll follow us wherever we go. High Chancellor Vexmeron raised his hand for silence. There may be another option. All eyes turned to him. 2 stellar cycles ago, our deep space probes detected a successful resistance against a Krex invasion force, a species we had previously dismissed as too volatile, too unpredictable to contact. Lyra's eyes widened. The humans? Yes, Vexmeron confirmed. While we were directing evolution and growing our crystal cities, they were fighting wars, surviving catastrophes, and developing technologies we had never considered. They turned their entire planet's magnetic field into a weapon during the Battle of Sol. They retrofitted mining ships into carriers. They used their own sun as a tactical asset. But they're dangerous, Councillor Astraven objected. Their history is filled with conflict. They still fight among themselves. Perhaps, Vexmeron agreed, but they fight for survival, for their homes, for each other. And right now, we need survivors. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Silveri had always prided themselves on rising above violence, on finding peaceful solutions. But peace wasn't an option with the Krex. It never had been. I've already prepared a quantum-encrypted transmission, Vexmeron continued. The humans maintain listening posts throughout this sector of the galaxy. They're curious by nature. They'll hear us. And if they refuse to help? Lyra asked. The High Chancellor's bioluminescence pulsed with what might have been hope. From what we've observed of humans, they have a peculiar trait. They're drawn to lost causes. They call it rooting for the underdog. Besides, he added, they hate bullies even more than they love fighting. And the Krex, they're the biggest bullies in the galaxy. The transmission was sent within the hour. The Silveri's quantum entanglement communicators, usually used for sharing art and scientific discoveries across the stars, now carried a desperate plea for help. The message was simple. To the people of Earth, we are the Silveri. Our civilization faces extinction at the hands of the Krex Empire. We have seen how you fought them. We have seen your strength. We ask for your help not as superiors or inferiors, but as a species that wishes to survive. Please respond. 3 days passed. The Krex fleet drew closer. The Silveri began evacuating their outer colonies, their living ships carrying refugees toward the homeworld. Lyra spent her time in the observatory, watching, waiting, hoping. On the fourth day, every quantum communicator in Nova Lumina activated simultaneously. A rough, confident voice filled the airways. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth merchant vessel Lucky Break. Currently 8 light years from your position, with a hold full of surplus Earth military gear and a crew that's spoiling for a fight. If you're still looking for help, we're interested in discussing terms. Fair warning, though. We do things a little differently than you might be used to." In the council chamber, Vex Maron's markings pulsed with the first real hope they'd shown in days. "Different," he said softly, "is exactly what we need." Captain Sarah Chen's Lucky Break dropped out of FTL on the edge of the Silveri system, and the gathered council members got their first look at their potential saviors. The ship was unconventional, to say the least. What had clearly started life as a standard Earth cargo hauler now bristled with modifications that made it look like a cross between a merchant vessel and a hedgehog. "Is that construction equipment mounted on their hull?" Lyra whispered to Vex Maron as they watched the approach from the spaceport's crystal dome. "Industrial mining lasers," came Captain Chen's voice over the comm, somehow having heard the question. "Cheaper than military-grade weapons, hits almost as hard, and nobody expects them. Plus, they're great for actual mining when we're not in a fight." There was a pause, which is most of the time, honestly. We're merchants first. The ship's landing was surprisingly graceful for its cobbled-together appearance. As the dust settled, a delegation of humans emerged, 6 of them, led by Captain Chen. They were a diverse group, their environmental suits marked with patches and modifications much like their ship. Chen herself was a compact woman with short black hair streaked with silver, laugh lines around her eyes, and the confident stride of someone who had seen her share of trouble and lived to joke about it. "Nice place you've got here," Chen said, looking up at the crystal spires with genuine appreciation. "Shame about the Kreks wanting to wreck it." She turned to face the council. "So, let's talk strategy." In the Grand Council chamber, Chen and her crew laid out their plans. They weren't what anyone expected. "Your biggest problem," Chen explained, pointing to a holographic display of the system, "isn't your lack of weapons. It's that you're thinking like the Silveri. Noble, advanced, civilized. The Kreks are counting on that. They expect you to either surrender or try to fight a conventional battle you can't win. And what do you suggest instead?" Counselor Astra Ven asked, her tone carefully neutral. Chen grinned. "We get dirty. We fight ugly. We use everything you've got. Not as it was intended, but as it could be." She gestured to her ship's engineer, Dr. Marcus Wong, who stepped forward with a data crystal. "Your bioengineering is centuries ahead of ours," Wong said, his eyes bright with scientific enthusiasm. "Those living crystals you use for buildings. With some modifications, they could form the basis of a distributed sensor network. Your atmospheric processors. They can become environmental weapons. Even your art installations can be repurposed." "Repurposed?" Lyra asked, both fascinated and slightly horrified. "How?" Chen's security chief, a tall woman named Yara Patil, took over. "Those light sculptures in your parks, the ones that create complex holographic displays. They can project false sensor readings, make our ships look like they're where they aren't, make their ships think they're seeing things that don't exist." The council chamber buzzed with murmurs as the humans continued their presentation. They weren't suggesting the Silveri abandon their principles. They were showing them how to use those very principles as weapons. "Here's the thing about the Kreks," Chen said, her voice cutting through the discussion. "They're bullies, yeah, but they're also predictable. They've gotten used to everyone either rolling over or fighting the same way they do. They don't adapt well because they've never had to." She smiled, and there was something predatory in it. "Humanity. Adaptation is what we do best, and we're going to teach you how." Over the next few days, Nova Lumina transformed. The Lucky Break's crew worked alongside Silveri engineers, teaching them to think differently about their own technology. Crystal spires were subtly restructured to contain sensor arrays and energy redistributors. Parks became camouflage networks. Even the Silveri's living ships began to change, their biological systems adapted with new purposes in mind. But the most significant change was in the Silveri themselves. They watched as Chen's crew demonstrated their innovations, showing how seemingly harmless technologies could become devastating advantages when used creatively. The humans' enthusiasm was infectious, their confidence building bridges across the cultural divide. "Your civilization hasn't survived this long by being weak," Chen told Lyra one evening as they watched crews installing modified crystal matrices throughout the city. "You've survived by being smart, by understanding life itself. We're just showing you how to use that knowledge in ways you never considered." "It feels strange," Lyra admitted. "All these preparations for violence, using our achievements for warfare." Chen's expression softened slightly. "You're not preparing for violence. You're preparing to protect your home, your people, your way of life. There's a difference." She gestured to the city around them. "Everything we're doing. It's about preservation, not destruction. The Kreks want to tear all this down. We're teaching you how to stop them." As if to emphasize her point, a test of the new defense system activated, sending waves of rainbow light cascading through the crystal networks. But now those beautiful displays carried encoded tactical data, sensor readings, and shield harmonics. "Besides," Chen added with a wink, "wait until you see what we've done with your agricultural systems. Turns out those seed distribution networks of yours, they make excellent delivery systems for something we call smart dust. The Kreks won't know what hit them." The transformation continued, racing against the approaching Kreks fleet. The Silveri learned to look at their achievements differently, to see the potential for defense in their works of peace. And in doing so, they began to understand something about their human allies, that there was a profound creativity in their approach to conflict, an artistry to their adaptability that wasn't so different from Silveri philosophy after all. They were nearly ready, but the real test was still to come. The Kreks fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm of metal and malice, their ships black against the stars. From the observatory, now converted into a tactical command center, Lyra watched alongside Captain Chen as the enemy vessels moved into attack formation. The Kreks were known for their efficiency. They would expect this to be a simple operation. After all, they had conquered dozens of peaceful civilizations before. "Look at that formation," Chen muttered, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Textbook assault pattern. They really don't expect any resistance." She tapped her comm unit. "All ships, maintain emissions control. Let them think we're as helpless as they expect." The Silveri's modified vessels waited in the shadow of their moons, their living hulls now harboring surprises that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. The agricultural ships, usually used for seeding new colonies, had been particularly transformed. Their biological delivery systems now carried specialized nanites, what the humans called smart dust, capable of interfering with Krek's targeting systems. "First wave approaching," Yara Patil announced from her station. "They're launching landing craft toward the outer colonies." "Right on schedule," Chen nodded. "Lyra, how are your people holding up?" Lyra checked the neural network connecting the Silveri defenders. "They're nervous, but ready. The crystal matrix is fully charged." "Good. Let's show them our first trick." Chen opened a general channel. "Phase 1. Begin." Across the surface of Nova Lumina, the crystal spires that had for centuries channeled nothing more dangerous than art and information came alive with new purpose. The modified matrices began broadcasting on frequencies that the humans had discovered during their own encounters with the Kreks, frequencies that played havoc with their neural interfaces. The effect was immediate. The first wave of Kreks ships began to drift off course, their crews experiencing what would feel to them like severe vertigo. But this was just the beginning. "Agricultural ships, you're up," Chen commanded. "Time to plant some seeds." The modified seed ships emerged from hiding, their organic launchers spewing clouds of microscopic machines into space. To the Krek sensors, it would appear as nothing more than debris, perhaps the desperate attempt of the Silveri to obscure their targets. They wouldn't realize their mistake until it was too late. The smart dust, designed by Dr. Wong to mimic the Silveri's own biological systems, began to infiltrate the Krek ships through their external sensor arrays. Once inside, they started their work, not destroying, but transforming. Communication systems began broadcasting false data. Navigation computers showed phantom targets. Weapon systems reported critical failures that didn't exist. They're breaking formation, Yara reported with satisfaction. The flagship is trying to restore order, but our interference is preventing clear communication. The Krek's response was predictable. They launched fighters, expecting to overwhelm whatever was causing the interference through sheer numbers. That's when Chen revealed the second phase of their defense. "Activate the art installations," she ordered. Throughout the Silveri system, what had once been purely aesthetic holographic displays now projected something very different. Sophisticated sensor ghosts that made it impossible for the Kreks to distinguish real targets from false ones. Their fighters, trained to rely on automated targeting systems, found themselves attacking empty space while real threats slipped past their defenses. But the true masterstroke came from an unexpected source. The Silveri's hydroponics experts, working with Chen's engineer, had modified their atmospheric processors to release clouds of engineered spores. These spores, harmless to organic life, proved remarkably effective at coating the hulls of Krek's vessels. Once attached, they began to grow, forming living networks that interfered with the ship's heat dissipation systems. "They're overheating," Lyra observed, watching as ship after ship was forced to power down weapons to prevent critical system failure. "Our gardens are defeating their warships. Never underestimate the power of good gardening," Chen quipped, but her eyes were serious as she watched the tactical display. "This is just the beginning, though. They'll adapt, try new tactics. That's when we show them what else we've got up our sleeves." As if on cue, the Krek's flagship launched a massive energy burst, attempting to clear the spores and smart dust from their immediate vicinity. Chen's smile widened. "Thank you for the power donation," she said softly, as the Silveri crystal matrix absorbed the energy burst. The spires of Nova Lumina blazed with captured power, channeling it through networks that had been carefully redesigned over the past weeks. "All defense points," Chen commanded. "Prepare for Phase 3. Let's show them what happens when you combine human ingenuity with Silveri sophistication." The battle was far from over, but for the first time in their history, the Silveri were not just resisting. They were winning. And they were doing it not by becoming warriors, but by turning their greatest achievements in peace into instruments of defense. As Lyra watched their plans unfold, she realized that this was perhaps the most important lesson the humans had taught them. True strength didn't come from weapons, but from the creativity and determination to use what you had in ways your enemies could never expect. The Krek's flagship, a massive vessel named the Eternal Dominion, emerged from the chaos of its scattered fleet like a wounded predator. Its hull was partially covered in the bioluminescent spores, giving it an almost beautiful appearance that belied its deadly purpose. Commander Vexthrax, the Krek's fleet leader, had finally realized this would not be the easy conquest they had anticipated. "They're adapting," Dr. Wong noted from his station, watching as the Krek ships began using concentrated plasma bursts to clear paths through the smart dust clouds, switching to thermal shielding to counter our spores. Captain Chen nodded, unsurprised. "They're survivors. It's what made them dangerous in the first place." She turned to Lyra. "Time for the real test. Is the Harmony Network ready?" The Harmony Network was perhaps the most ambitious fusion of human and Silveri technology yet conceived. It took the Silveri's natural ability to connect through their crystal matrices and combined it with human neural interface technology, creating a system that allowed for unprecedented coordination between defenders. All nodes are synchronized, Lyra confirmed, her bioluminescent markings pulsing in time with the network's rhythm. Though I still can't quite believe what we're about to attempt. Chen's expression was grim but determined. Sometimes the best defense is to show your enemy something so incredible, so unexpected, that it changes their entire perspective. She opened a channel to all allied ships. All units, initiate Protocol Starlight. Across the Silveri system, crystal spires began to pulse with accumulated energy. The living ships, their hulls now integrated with modified human tech, moved into precise positions. What followed would be talked about in whispered awe for generations to come. The Harmony Network activated in full, connecting every Silveri defender, every modified crystal, every transformed piece of their once purely peaceful technology. The energy they had been gathering, from Krek's weapons, from their own suns, from every available source, began to flow through pathways that were part technology, part biology, and part art. The Krek's fleet's sensors registered an enormous power spike, but by then it was too late. Every crystal structure in the system, from the smallest garden decoration to the tallest spire of Nova Lumina, became part of a vast, interconnected lattice of energy. The Silveri's mastery of light and life merged with human tactical creativity to create something entirely new. By the void, Vexthrax's transmission crackled across open channels as he witnessed what followed. What are they doing? The crystal lattice created what appeared to be a massive holographic display, but it was far more than mere illusion. The humans had helped the Silveri modify their artistic light sculptures to generate quantum-entangled fields, turning the entire system into what Chen called a probability weapon. Space itself seemed to shimmer and fold. Krek's ships found themselves firing at targets that existed in multiple positions simultaneously, their weapons passing harmlessly through quantum ghosts, while real attacks came from seemingly impossible angles. The Silveri's living ships, guided by the Harmony Network, moved with perfect coordination through the chaos, their organic hulls pulsing with borrowed energy. Their flagship is charging weapons, Yara reported. Looks like they're preparing for a full barrage. Perfect, Chen smiled. That's exactly what we want them to do. The Eternal Dominion fired, unleashing enough firepower to level a continent. But the crystal lattice caught the energy, channeled it, transformed it. In an instant, every piece of art, every growing crystal, every modified structure in the Silveri system became both a mirror and a lens. The result was devastating in its beauty. The Krex's own energy was reflected back at them, not as a weapon, but as pure light split into every frequency of the spectrum. Their sensors, already struggling with the quantum field effects, were completely overwhelmed. Ships lost all targeting capability, their crews temporarily blinded by the display. Now, Chen commanded, show them what art can really do. The Harmony Network shifted phase, and the light show transformed. Instead of merely dazzling the Krek's fleet, it began to communicate. Every ship in their fleet was suddenly surrounded by displays that spoke directly to their neural interfaces, showing them images from Silveri history, culture, and art. But interwoven with these were humanity's contributions, scenes of peace following conflict, of cooperation overcoming hatred, of beauty rising from destruction. What are you doing? Vexthrax demanded, his voice a mixture of confusion and awe. We're showing you another way, Lyra responded, her voice carrying across all channels. You seek conquest. We show you creation. You bring destruction. We offer transformation. The Krek's fleet hung motionless in space, their crews transfixed by the display. For the first time in their history, they were faced not with weakness to exploit or resistance to crush, but with something their warrior culture had never prepared them for, the possibility that strength could exist in forms they had never imagined. In the days following what would become known as the Luminous Defense, the Silveri system buzzed with activity of a different kind. The Krek's fleet had withdrawn, not in defeat exactly, but in something closer to transformation. Their flagship, the Eternal Dominion, remained behind, not as a threat, but as an embassy of sorts. Commander Vexthrax stood in the Grand Council chamber of Nova Lumina, his massive frame seeming somehow less intimidating than it had before. The warrior race's characteristic armor now bore unusual modifications, crystal formations that pulsed with a soft light, a voluntary adoption of silvery aesthetics that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. "We have conquered dozens of worlds," Vexthrax addressed the assembled council, his voice carrying notes of both humility and wonder. "But never have we been conquered by beauty." He turned to Captain Chen. "Or by such unexpected strategies." Chen leaned against a crystal pillar, her casual posture belying the historic nature of the moment. "That's the thing about humans," she said. "We learned a long time ago that the strongest warrior isn't always the one with the biggest weapons. Sometimes it's the one who makes you question why you're fighting in the first place." The changes were visible throughout the system. Krex engineers worked alongside Silveri artisans, their natural talent for survival finding new expression in the creation of hybrid technologies. The crystal matrices that had defended the system were being adapted into communication networks that could bridge the gap between different species' neural interfaces. Lyra stood at her usual observation post, but now she watched ships of 3 different species moving peacefully through Silveri space. "Did you know this would happen?" she asked Chen, who had joined her for what had become their regular evening discussions. "That we'd turn one of the most aggressive species in known space into art appreciators." Chen laughed. "No, can't say I saw that coming exactly. But humans have a long history of turning enemies into allies. Sometimes the best way to end a fight is to show your opponent a better path." The lucky break had become something of a legend, its unusual modifications now being studied by a joint team of human, Silveri, and Krex engineers. Dr. Wong had barely slept in days, excitedly exploring the possibilities of combining Krex survival adaptations with Silveri bioengineering. "The galaxy's changing," Chen observed, watching a Krex shuttle dock with a Silveri living ship. "The old ways of thinking about strength and weakness, about war and peace, they're not going to work anymore." High Chancellor Vexmeron, approaching with Commander Vexithrax, nodded in agreement. "Perhaps that is why humanity was needed," he said, "not just to help us defend ourselves, but to show us all a new way forward." "You showed us that strength can flow like water," Vexthrax added, his translator struggling to convey the poetic nuance that had recently entered Krex's speech. "Adapting, transforming, creating rather than destroying. Our scientists are already talking about applications for peace that we never considered." The changes weren't limited to technology and politics. Cultural exchange had begun almost immediately. Krex warriors were learning Silveri art forms, their natural precision finding new expression in crystal sculpting. Silveri architects were incorporating elements of Krex survival engineering into their designs, creating structures that were both beautiful and incredibly resilient. And through it all, humanity played a unique role, not as conquerors or saviors, but as bridges between different ways of thinking. The Lucky Break's crew had become instructors, teaching both Silveri and Krex the human knack for creative problem-solving and adaptation. "We're establishing a permanent embassy," Chen announced, somewhat sheepishly. "Earth's government thinks this could be the beginning of something important, a new kind of alliance based on complementary strengths rather than shared fears." Lyra's markings pulsed with amusement, and nothing to do with the trading opportunities. "Well," Chen grinned, "we are merchants first, but sometimes the best trades aren't about goods or technology. Sometimes they're about ideas, about different ways of seeing the universe." As the 3 suns of the Silveri system set, casting their light through crystal spires now bearing touches of both Krex engineering and human innovation, Lyra reflected on how much had changed. What had begun as a desperate call for help had become something far more profound, a demonstration that the greatest power often lay not in the ability to destroy, but in the capacity to transform. You know what the best part is? Chen said, watching the sunset. Every species involved came out of this stronger than they went in. Not because we won a war, but because we found a better alternative. In the growing twilight, ships of 3 different species moved through the crystal-lit darkness of silvery space, their lights mingling like stars, a living testament to the power of human ingenuity, silvery wisdom, and the unexpected paths to peace that open up when different worlds learn to see through each other's eyes.